everybody, Mike here, coming back at you with part 3 of the Gospelchops drum video series. So essentially, we're going to be doing the same video format as last time, except this time I'm going to be sort of talking through what's going on. It might make it a little bit easier for you to follow along. This is definitely one of those fills where it sounds more complicated than it really is. It's actually quite simple once you break it down. Essentially, it's a 16th note triplet fill. On the worksheet, you'll notice it says swung 16th, but I would disregard that personally. I think it's a little bit easier to just think of them as 16th note triplets, which, for those of you that don't know, it's an artificial grouping, 6 notes to a quarter note. So I'm going to count it out slowly for you and play it really slow and just show you sort of what the fill is comprised of. Even slower. Another thing I wanted to point out is you'll notice on the worksheet, the last note, as in the of 4, is a right, but it actually puts a little left with a star beside it. Basically what that means is you can sort of go about the fill 2 ways. If you end with your left, you're going to end up setting up to crash with your right, which if you're playing the fill through one time, is usually, I would think, the best way to do it. But again, it's whatever's more comfortable for you. The right hand basically would force you to crash with your left. And if you're going to play the fill continuously, saying, 2 bars, 3 bars, 4 bars in a row without a groove, keep in mind that both are going to have their own challenges. If you end with your right, you're going to actually end up having a double right. And if you end with your left, you're going to have to cross over to come to the snare to start off the fill for the next bar. So I'll show you what I mean by that. So this would be the double right. So you can kind of see I'm coming back to the snare just with my right hand. Right, you see that? Right there. So the other way to do it is to have the left hand be the last note, which again will make you cross over, which will look a little bit like this. Right, so if that's more comfortable for you, it certainly looks better from a showmanship's perspective, but it could be more challenging. Things tend to get a little bit tangled when you start crossing over, and in Gospelchops, though, it is a part of the aesthetic for sure. But when the fill's played slower, it really is quite easy to get used to just crashing with the left hand if you have to, sort of like this. Right, so it just kind of keeps everything tied together the same way. But again, if you're not comfortable crashing with your left, it's going to feel a little bit wonky when you come back into that groove. Now, there's another reason to actually end with your right besides not wanting to cross over and come right back to here. If you're not playing the fill twice in a row and you're coming right back into like a classic Gospelchops groove that's really quick, say on the ride over here, you can go straight from the floor tom right to the right hand right away. So I'll demonstrate what I mean by that. So it's a little bit swifter to kind of just, especially if you want to put the snare right on one with the ride. It just kind of keeps it really tight. And there's a lot of variations with this fill. We're going to get to that in just a sec. So third thing I want to talk about is single versus double kick. So this fill obviously has double kicks throughout the whole thing. Now with the double kick, it's going to be a little bit quicker and a little bit cleaner at higher speeds for most of you. Myself, personally, I'm still working on getting a really fast single kick and to have it sound as clean as double kick. But for the Gospelchop application, because this could also be used in R&B and a few other genres for sure, but for Gospelchops, especially at the higher speed stuff, you're probably going to need to have a double kick going on somewhere. So that's going to look a little something like this. And again, you can vary between whether you're doing the crossover or the double right. Personally, I find the left to be a little bit more comfortable, even though you have to cross over. It seems to just keep things moving a little bit nicer. The double right seems a little bit jarring at higher speeds. So when it comes to the single kick, you can get your slide technique going, or you can try to do the Lionel Lewis technique where you sort of do that little swivel at the top, which is a little bit trickier, but you get more even sound, which was the whole purpose behind why he did that. One thing to keep in mind too about when you're repeating the fill several times in a row is it is going to feel a little bit strange, and it sort of has this almost odd time like reset. It really feels like a loop, but the tricky part is that if you reset it, it's the only time where you have 4 notes on your hands followed by 2 notes on your foot, because otherwise it's actually a pattern. If you look at the worksheet, it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1. So essentially it's 3, 2, 3, 2, 3, and then 1. So if you do the fill twice, you essentially have that 1 note at the end plus 3 more at the beginning. So you have now 4 in between 2 kicks. So the pattern between the hands and the feet actually changes just that once. And that's what sort of might throw a lot of people off. It definitely threw me off when I was practicing the fill. But as long as you keep that in mind, that it's going to feel like you're going a little bit longer with your hands on that first time back around, you guys should have no problem with it. So let's get into some variations now. Essentially, we can do just beat 1, for example. And I'll put, instead of the snare on beat 2, I'll just put a hi-hat. You could just do all kinds of stuff, even with just that alone. You don't have to come to the hat. You can go to the crash. Another really cool one as well is basically just playing beat 4 with beat 1, because it's essentially a repeat, so you're going to get a lot of crossover happening. Really move the notes anywhere. You can play the same figures, but put them all over the kit. Another cool variation is playing just beat 1, but instead of doing the beat 2 note, you're literally just repeating 6 notes, beat 1 over and over and over again. So it sounds something like this. But instead of doing that right on the floor tom, we'll go right to the left. So we're essentially just doing this. I'm doing a little open hat there as well. And sometimes I was playing it as straight notes there, and sometimes I was playing it as a triplet. In mind, if you play it as straight notes, it's not going to really work out to be even groupings. It is going to go over the bar line. But however you look at it, it's still going to be a grouping of 6 notes. It can be used as a nice little lead-in fill too. So I'm going to show you some examples in a groove context. Essentially, it's just like you were seeing me do, you can go to the straight groove, you can go to a shuffle, whatever you're playing. There's a lot of different applications for this type of fill. So my favorite personally is to kind of go into sort of a halftime shuffle. That's my standard go-to for this fill, but there's a lot of different things. I'll just demonstrate a couple right now. Again, I was just doing some variations there, and really it'll depend on the musical application whether you want to play through the full bar or not. But a lot of times you really won't find that big of a pocket to do something like this. It's going to be very genre specific, but even for straight grooves, it's pretty cool. Another straight groove on the ride. And again, a lot of times I'm crashing with my left just because, it's what I choose to do in the moment. It's really going to be, again, what's more comfortable for you. Both methods work as long as you're comfortable crashing with the left. And that's exactly why on this worksheet they wrote both versions. One thing as well with the groove variations is, this fill can be played actually quite slow and maybe sort of emphasize the swung part of it, the swung factor a little bit more. And it works really great as like a Motown thing, right? Sometimes it's not all about just blazing fast chops. You want to have, the ability to play slowly when you need to. So here's an example of that. I just play sort of the beginning of the fill. Essentially what I'm doing is I'm just taking, bits and parts of the fill, adding rests in between the notes that exist already, and just sort of shifting the context. Because if I just played it straight the whole way, it wouldn't really fit in that context, right? As soon as you play it up to speed, it sort of changes the whole vibe all over again, right? So the idea was to keep it sort of Motown and a little bit more funky, right? Right, omit notes, that's another thing you can do. Just add some space, that's really all that is, right? You can do a little cool 2-3 bar solo with something like that, right? Just repeat the same thing you're doing, just do the figures, right? When I come to that tom 1 there and the snare, I just repeated that twice, right? And again, that would work great as a lead-in too for a song. Or we could do exactly what I just did before. So another thing with the cowbell groove, this is an instance where I would actually want to end the left because you're going to be able to go over to the cowbell right after a lot easier. Because in my setup anyways, again, this is why it depends really on everybody's setup, everybody's playing style. To do that double right, I'd have to kind of hop over this microphone here to get to the cowbell. So essentially what's a better way to go about it is this. Now, again, a bit of a crossover, but it's going to be a lot less movement, technically, than going like this. And less tricky of a movement anyways. So that's literally just playing the first beat of that and just going right into the cowbell groove every time. So I'm playing basically half a bar of the cowbell groove and half a bar of the triplet thing. So again, all that is just playing 2 beats of the cowbell groove and then having the fill right after, just playing one figure of it. And again, ending with the left so I can come right back into that right after I finish the fill. All right, everybody, thanks for watching and thanks for subscribing and tuning into all these videos. I'm going to definitely be releasing more drum content, more drum covers very soon. I'm going to do part 4 of this Gospelchops video and finish off the worksheet. And once we're done that, I'm going to move on to a new concept for everybody. Thank you and take care.